أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام عليك يا سيد المرسلين يا خاتم النبيين يا شفيع المذنبين يا أنيس الغريبين يا رحمة للعالمين صلى الله عليك وعلى آلك وسلم. Today, of course, is the second of Ramadan, and this year is easier to remember because it correlates with March. So we started 1st of March, and so it's just easier to remember that way. But I want to kind of cover the connection between Ahlul Bayt, the Quran, and Ramadan. Because when Ramadan comes, as we all know, everybody talks about, this is the month of the Quran. And everybody's reciting the Quran more, which we should do, and listening to the Quran more, again, which we should do, and trying to make more salat and recite more Quran in the salat and all of these things. So, but it's interesting. A few years ago, there was this one place that, on Eid, after Eid, they were having this celebration, and the flyer was saying, "Oh, come and celebrate! This is the month of the Quran, and we've completed the Quran, and we need to celebrate this, this celebration of the Quran." And the reason I say it's interesting because these are the same people that tell you that celebrating the Mawlid, the coming of Rasulullah ﷺ, is bid'ah. So they were doing this celebration, but they forget the celebration of the one who, because of whom we are given the Quran, who the Quran was revealed to, and who in reality is the living, talking, breathing Quran. But you can't separate the Quran from Ahlul Bayt. So, if we look at Ramadan, this is the month in which the revelation begins. First revelation, the first 5 verses of Surah Alaq were revealed in Ramadan in the cave of Hira. And there's a dispute or disagreement among the scholars as to exactly what date it was. Some say it was the 19th, some say it was the 21st, some say it was the 27th. But everybody agrees it was Ramadan. So that is undisputed. At least somebody can dispute anything, but for the most part, that's undisputed. So this is the beginning. What that allowed us to see was the connection between the revelation and the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was already there. He had been there for 40 years, where people could see him and interact with him. And there were those whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given special eyes to who could see something different in him. We know those who associated, like Abu Bakr, his wife Khadija al-Kubra, Sayyidina Ali karamallah, all of those, Zayd bin Harith. What does he say when his parents came, when his father and uncle came to take him back? Zayd bin Harith, we know he's the slave, Zayd bin Haritha. He said, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam allows him to be free. Yet he chooses to remain in the service of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this is, 15 years before the declaration of prophethood. So even when his uncle and his father come to take him back, because they received word that all of the slaves of Khadija have been allowed freedom. So he says to his father, he says, "I see in him something I've never seen in anyone else. Something that causes me to stay with him. So I don't want to leave him." So for those who were given those eyes, they could see something special in him. But there were very few who could see what that was. They knew, okay, there's something special, there's something different here, but what is it? And so when the revelation of the Quran comes, this is that trigger point. You know, you could say this was the catalyst for him to show himself, to show his reality, at least to give us another glimpse into his reality, because we don't know his true reality. And so that is what triggered that connection now, that we could see. Not that it wasn't there before, you know, because he was already the talking, living, breathing Quran. But now we are allowed to see an aspect of that. This is what Ramadan gives us. You know, or at least what it should give us, is to try to understand that connection between the word of Allah and the beloved of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he has said that the Quran and my Ahlul Bayt will never be separated. And I'm going to go back over the hadith before I get into this aspect of things that we talked about at the end of the talk this past Friday. So, and I'm going to give kind of a little bit more background so you understand the situation. Why? You know, because it's interesting. Imam Ali Rida is the only one of the Imams of Ahlul Bayt who are buried in Khurasan. You know, the rest of them are either in Iraq or Jannatul Baqi. Okay, so he's the only one who's separate. Okay. And you'll understand why that, you know, as I explain this. And we talked about this when we talked about him specifically. So this will be kind of a review from that standpoint. It's also interesting that there, you know, at that shrine of his, there are many collections of the Quran, ancient Quran, including one which is said to be written by Sayyidina Ali Karamallah Wajhu himself. And so now, of course, they've been taken from there, been archived in various libraries. But, so basically what happens is, Harun Rashid was the king, okay? And so Harun Rashid is the one who poisoned Imam Musa Kadhim, the father of Imam Ali Rida, because he saw him as Banu Abbas stole the rule from Ahlul Bayt. So he saw him as competition, and he saw him as one who could overthrow him, which he could, if he had wanted to, really wanted to. Yeah. When Harun dies, you know, he leaves his oldest son Amin as the king. Amin wasn't very competent. So when you have multiple brothers and you have one that's not competent, sometimes you can get competition. And especially when there's kingship involved. And you see this where one brother kills another brother just to gain the throne. And you look throughout history, this is a common theme. So when Amin, again, who's not very competent, becomes the king, two of his brothers challenge him, one of whom is Mamun. So there is basically a civil war for the kingship, in essence. And what Mamun is able to do is he's able to gain the trust and the support of the religious factions. So the religious people, and if you look at Khurasan at that time, so if you look at the Islamic Empire at that time, it included Egypt, you know, basically you look at from middle of northern Africa all the way to Sindh, was all under the control of Banu Abbas at that time. So all of this area. So Khurasan is also involved in that area. Khurasan is basically the headquarters of the Muhaddithin. This is where all of these scholars of hadith, if you look at, you know, these great scholars of hadith, the vast majority of them came from Khurasan. Imam Bukhari, Imam Muslim, Imam Tirmizi, Imam Nisa'i, Imam Hakim, thousands of them are from Khurasan. And the way he gained their support was one, of course, like all these politicians, and kings are not really different than politicians, they just politic a little differently sometimes, is that he put on this dress of piety and being religious and supporting the religious factions. And the other thing that he did to finalize their support was that he said that I will name, if I am made the king, I will name Imam Ali Rida as my heir. So when I die, he will become the king. So when he does this, a lot of these factions, a lot of the religious groups supported him. So he comes into power because of the support of the religious groups and the religious people. Of course, he will betray them, like kings generally do, politicians generally do. So Imam Ali Rida at this time is in Medina Munawwara. When Ma'mun wins, he's called to Baghdad. If you look at his statements later on, he didn't want to go. Even if you look at the statements of his son, Imam Muhammad Taqi. He knew what the game was. But he also knew that if he opposed the game, in that manner, then there would be consequences for a lot of other people. This is one of the characteristics of Ahlul Bayt. They are always looking out for the Ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So, he comes to Baghdad, and then eventually, Ma'mun decides that they're going to take a trip to Khurasan so he can personally thank those people who supported him and allowed him to gain the throne. And so they go in a certain direction, and they go eventually get there. When they arrive there, Imam Ali Rida is riding his camel. And Imam Ishaq ibn Rahway comes immediately when they approach the city. He comes and he grabs hold of the reins of the camel of Imam Ali Rida so he can have the honor of chauffeuring him into the city. Showing the people that I am his servant. This is what this indicates. I am his servant, and this is an honor for me to be able to do this. So, of course, if you don't know who Ishaq ibn Rahway is, then it doesn't mean much. So who is he? He is the teacher of Imam Bukhari. He is known as the Muhaddis of Khurasan. If you look at all of these Muhaddis of course means scholars of Hadith. If you look at all of these Muhaddis of Khurasan, they are all in some way his students. Right. Including Imam Bukhari, including Imam Muslim. Right. So, so these people, there are people, and I'm saying this for multiple reasons, but one of the reasons is that there are people who try to downplay the knowledge and the status of Ali Rida. There's a certain scholar, Ibn Taymiyyah, who talks about, when he talks about these scholars of Ahlul Bayt, he says, yes, up to Musa Qadim, they were all great scholars, but then after that, they really, weren't that big scholars of knowledge. Well, Imam Ishaq disagrees with that, just because he wants the honor of doing this. And Imam Ishaq is that scholar who convinced Imam Bukhari to compile his Sahih. So Sahih al-Bukhari was compiled, at the instigation of Ishaq ibn Rahway. So of course, when he arrives, you have all of these scholars, thousands of scholars there waiting for him to come. Which also, you think about this. They weren't paying attention to the king. They weren't paying attention to the superficial king. All these scholars are paying attention to the real king. You know, so what do you think the superficial king is thinking? You know, he sees, oh, you know, he knew this even before, you know, because his plan was different from the beginning. So when they, you know, bring him in and they place him on the stage, and so you have thousands of scholars down and he's up on the pulpit, and then they request him to narrate the hadith. So they didn't know which hadith he was going to narrate, but they wanted a hadith that he had heard from his father, who had heard from his father, who had heard from his father, all the way back to Sayyidina Ali karamallahu wajh, who had heard it from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who, you know, so this is what they wanted. And of course, Ahlul Bayt, he gave them more than what they wanted. So he starts narrating. He says that I, Ali bin Musa Rida, heard from my father Musa bin Jafar Qadin, who heard from his father Jafar bin Muhammad Sadiq, who heard from his father Muhammad bin Ali Baqir, who heard from his father Ali bin Hussein Zain al-Abidin, who heard from his father Hussein bin Ali, who heard from his father Ali bin Abi Talib, who heard from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that La ilaha illallah, that there is to bear witness that there is no one worthy of worship but Allah, is my fortress. So Allah says that this is my fortress, and whoever enters my fortress has entered safety. So this goes in line with the hadith in Sahih Bukhari, which says that man qala la ilaha illallah fadakhala al-jannah, that whosoever says la ilaha illallah, he will enter paradise. So now, when he says this, he narrates this hadith and he says, you know, the whole thing. So they all, you know, are so happy, overjoyed. And, you know, the Allahu Akbar, Allah, you see here these cries of Allahu Akbar coming. And then he settles them down by saying, he says, yes, but there are conditions to this. So this is why, you know, you have people that will argue with you about, you know, the saying in Sahih Bukhari, see, anyone who says La ilaha illallah, he will enter paradise. Yeah, but there are conditions. First, the condition is Muhammadur Rasulullah. You know, if I can look at it two ways. One is that, you know, if I tell a child to recite Qul Huwallah, right? The child doesn't say Qul Huwallah and stop. He knows, even the child knows what he's being told is to recite Surah Ikhlas. So he recites from Qul Huwallah all the way to end. In fact, he starts with A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem, Bismillahir rahmanir rahim, Qul huwallahu ahad, Allahus samad, lam yalid wa lam yulad wa lam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad. He doesn't say Qul huwallah and stop. Right? So here when Rasulullah is saying is that whosoever says La ilaha illallah is understood Muhammadur Rasulullah. But even if I don't think of it that way, well, for me to accept this saying, I have to accept Rasulullah first, because he's the one who's saying it. How can I say, okay, see, whoever says La ilaha illallah, he enters paradise. Well, who told you that? If you can't accept the one who told you that, then how can you accept this? So even from that perspective, it's understood. Muhammadur Rasulullah is understood there. Okay? So here he, yeah. Hello? Assalamu alaikum. आप शायद दूसरे ग्रुप में आए हैं. I don't know who that was. So here again, so when he says yes, but there are conditions to this. So La ilaha illallah has conditions. And he says, and I am one of those conditions. You know, meaning what? Meaning that the love of Ahlul Bayt is a condition to this. And without the love of Ahlul Bayt, no ibadah is accepted by Allah. Because how can you claim to love Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam without loving those who are from him? Without loving those who he loves? And even Ibn Taymiyyah, and I keep saying even Ibn Taymiyyah because Ibn Taymiyyah is the one who created a lot of issues. Okay? Even Ibn Taymiyyah writes that the love of Ahlul Bayt is not an option, it's an obligation. It is fard. And of course, they say this and then they write something a little different on the side, but even he has to acknowledge this. And so, coming back to where we started. So, and like I said last time, and I'll reiterate this time, and I said it last night as well. Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal and Imam Ibn Majah, both of them have said about this narration that the isnad, the chain of narrators here, has within it the power to cure the insane. Yeah. So you have one who the Ummah has accepted as one of the Imams of Fiqh, and you have the other who the Ummah has accepted as one of the Imams of Hadith. Both of them saying that this isnad, this chain of narrators, has within it the power to cure the insane. So we should all try to cure the insanity within us. So we should know them, we should love them, and we should remember them often. It's not like, I just memorize the names and that's it. And and the love should drive us to try to follow them. Now coming back to that point. When Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he talks about, when he says in the hadiths in Sahih Muslim, that the Quran and my household, the Quran and Ahlul Bayt will never be separated. Okay. So, when we look at the household, at that time we're looking at Ali, Fatima, Hassan and Hussein alayhimus salam. Because these are the ones who he took under the cloak and he said, Allahumma ha'ulahi ahli. That Allah, only these are my family. But then of course those who came from them. So the lineage of Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And especially when you look at those who aren't just from the lineage, but those who fulfill the rights of that lineage. You look at, all these Imams of Ahlul Bayt that we talk about. You look at, Sayyid Abdul Qadir Jilani, even much later on. Alayhi salam, rahmatullahi alayhi, radiyallahu anhu. They all apply. Okay? And people say, how can you say that? Well, read the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Taha, which is Surah number 20, verse number 47, وَالسَّلَامُ عَلَيَّ مَنِ اتَّبَعَ الْهُدَى. Salam be upon those who follow right guidance. These aren't just those who follow right guidance, these are the ones who bring other people into the right guidance. So how can you not say salam to them? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself. So, because it's interesting, you say that about Ahlul Bayt and how can you say that? This is only for the prophets. Where does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say it's only for the prophets? He says salamun ala al-mursaleen, yes, but he also says salam on others. Anyone for whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent his salam. Okay. So, again, the Quran cannot be separated. If you try to separate the Quran from Ahlul Bayt, then you have no understanding of the Quran. Okay. Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, rahmatullahi alayhi, he says that there are more verses in the Quran revealed in honor of Ahlul Bayt than any other person or any other entity. He says that there are 313 verses specifically revealed in honor of Ahlul Bayt, in honor of Sayyidina Ali karamallahu wajh and Ahlul Bayt. Of course, he is part of Ahlul Bayt, but specify him because people try to separate him. To the extent that there are verses in the Quran that no one acted upon except for Sayyidina Ali, Karamallah. And so, Surah Mujadila, okay, which is Surah number 58. Verse number 12. And we'll read the translation first and then come back to some of the background here. O you who believe. So the verse, of course, starting off, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu. إِذَا نَجَيْتُمُ الرَّسُولَ فَقَدِّمُوا بَيْنَ يَدَيْهِ. When you consult the messenger in private, spend something in charity before your private consultation. That will be best for you and most conducive to purity of conduct. But if you find not wherewithal, Allah is oft forgiving, most merciful. That last part of the verse was not revealed before. Okay. So this verse was kind of revealed in two pieces. So the first part of the verse is that if you consult privately with Rasulullah, then you need to give something in charity first. Otherwise you can't consult with him. Okay. So the background to this is that you have a lot of, as you expect. So, a lot of people wanted to, meet Rasulullah in private. And part of that is with some people, and you see this today, if the king has a private consultation with somebody, it increases his stature in the community. And I'm able to talk to him privately. Okay. So you had a lot of people who would come, and they weren't even really private issues, but they wanted to meet him privately. Okay. Rasulullah is busy with the whole ummah. And then everybody wants to take up his time. Which also, for him is very difficult, because any free time, he wants to be spending that in his private remembrance of Allah. And we've talked about this before. Right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals the verse. It's fine. If you want to do this, then you need to give something in charity first. Right? And the only one who acted upon this verse was Sayyidina Ali Karamallah, where he gave 1 dinar in charity, and then he came to Rasulullah privately. But the more interesting thing about that, and this again, this is Ahlul Bayt again. Even that private meeting was for the good of the ummah. Okay? So basically, you can't have private meeting and ask him something in private without giving charity. But for Ali, even that private meeting wasn't for himself, it was for the good of the ummah. And then the rest of the verse comes, which abrogates the beginning part, that if you can't, well, fine. Allah is forgiving and merciful. And then the other verse, 13, is it that ye are afraid of spending sums in charity before your private consultation with him? If then ye do not so, and Allah forgives you, then at least establish regular prayers, give zakat, and obey Allah and His Messenger, and Allah is well acquainted with all that ye do. So then that verse came, abrogating the previous verse. Because because when this verse was revealed, no one came. Part of it was that, you still had a lot of poor people, so this is before Khaybar, who couldn't afford anything. Ali radiallahu for the Ummah, he gives that charity, and he comes and he consults with Rasulullah about this itself. And Rasulullah asked him what should be the charity. He says 1 dinar, and Ali radiallahu says, Ya Rasulullah, even that's too much for most people. So he says, half a dinar? He says, Ya Rasulullah, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then reveals. But basically Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala kind of, in this manner, is telling the people, look, don't waste his time. You are not that important. So don't waste his time. So again, the only one who acted upon this verse is Ali radiallahu anhu. You cannot understand this verse without knowing Ali. And if it had not been for his actions, perhaps that verse would not have been abrogated. Again, this is the honor and the status of Ahlul Bayt. And the sad thing is that, you start talking about Ahlul Bayt and people, why aren't you talking about this or that? Okay, come on, man. Another verse in the Quran that we could not understand without Ali radiallahu anhu, okay, which is verse number 9 of Surah Hujurat. And again, all of this we've talked about before, but kind of in different places, so I'm kind of putting certain things together here. And the verse, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وإن طائفتان من المؤمنين اقتتلوا فأصلحوا بينهما. Okay. So if two parties among the believers fall into dispute or fall into a fight, make ye peace between them. But if one of them transgresses beyond bounds against the other, then fight ye all against the one that transgresses until it complies with the command of Allah. But if it complies, then make peace between them with justice and be fair, for Allah loves those who are fair. Okay. So this is one verse from the Quran that was impossible to be applied during the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because what's the verse saying? You have two parties that dispute, that fight, and then you have, arbitration between the two of them, right? And it's decided, okay, this party is right, and you need to do this to make amends to the other party. The other party does not comply. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not saying they're not Muslim. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that everybody together should force them to comply. They are still Muslim. So you have two parties of believers fighting. One party doesn't comply with what is truly right. Allah says, okay, everybody should try to force them to comply. But they are still believers. Even when they were not complying, they were still believers. Why can't this verse be applied during the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Why couldn't this verse be? Why could the practical application of this verse not be shown during the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Why? I'm asking. Think about it. I'll give you a hint. During the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if you had a dispute like this, who would they go to make the decision between the two parties? They would go to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? So now again, why can't this verse be applied then? Yeah, but what about his decision would change the dynamics of what this verse is talking about?
Would it make it sooner for us to do it?
No, it wouldn't make it sunnah, because if he decided, like you have a fight between two parties, and he says, okay, do this, and one party doesn't comply, they are no longer in belief. They are no longer Muslim. All right? And how can I say that with that, with no doubt? Because of the verse in Surah Nisa, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us the exact thing. Because again, this verse started with what? Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, and it talks about, no, this started when ta'afatani, not ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, but in when ta'afatani min al-mu'minina iqtatalu. You have two parties of believers, mu'minina iqtatalu, fighting, physically fighting, killing each other. And yet they're both believers. Surah Nisa, which is surah number 4, verse number 65. فَلَا وَرَبِّكَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is swearing by himself, but he's swearing by himself as the Lord of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He says what? فَلَا وَرَبِّكَ. And even the la here is also qasmi, qasam is swearing. So you have double swearing. He says, by no one else other than by your Lord, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. By the Lord of Muhammad, فَلَا وَرَبِّكَ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ حَتَّى يُحَكِّمُوكَ فِي مَا شَجَرَ بَيْنَهُمْ ثُمَّ لَا يَجِدُوا فِي أَنفُسِهِمْ حَرَجًا مِمَّا قَضَيْتَ وَيُسَلِّمُوا تَسْلِيمًا. By your Lord, لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ, none of them can have faith. None of them have faith until they make thee a judge in all disputes between them. But not only make you a judge, and find in their souls no resistance against your decision, but accept them with fullest conviction. Not only do they not find any resistance in what you have decided for them, but they love whatever you decide for them. That is the definition of the believer. Okay. So if Rasulullah had made a decision, and one side didn't comply, they are no longer Muslim. They just left faith. Okay. And the background to this verse, if you remember this, is the dispute between the hypocrite and the Jewish man in Medina Munawwara over water. Because the hypocrite, who people of course didn't know was a hypocrite, water would come onto his property before it would go onto the property of the Jewish man. So this water, so he could water his crops. And so this guy decided, I'm not going to let him have any of the water. Water war. Like between Georgia and Alabama and Florida. Water war. And Rasulullah, so they come to Rasulullah because the Jewish man said, let's go, and they disputed, they tried to work it out, they couldn't work it out. So the Jewish man says, well, let's go to your Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and have him decide for us. And the so-called Muslim says, let's go to Ka'b bin Ashraf. Ka'b bin Ashraf was one of the leaders of the Jews. And so the Jewish man insisted, no, I'm not going to him, I'm going to go to... Yeah. So when they come, Rasulullah hears them both out, and then he tells the so-called Muslim, he says that, he is right, and do not stop any of the water from going onto his property. And they, of course, leave, and then the so-called Muslim says, let's get a second opinion. Let's go to Umar. Because he didn't understand Umar. And the Jewish man says, look, your prophet just decided, what are you talking about? He said, no, let's go. He insists. So he said, fine, let's go. He understood Umar. The Jewish man understood Umar. He said, okay, fine, let's go. So when they go, of course, long story short, they lay their case out before him, and then the Jewish man says, we're just coming from your prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he decided in my favor. So he asked him, is he true? Is he what he's saying true? He said, yes. He said, fine, I'll decide. Let me give you my decision. And he pulls his sword out, and of course, dispatches the so-called Muslim. He says, that's my decision. All the people in Medina Munawwar are up in arms. Umar killed a Muslim, Umar killed a Muslim. The Rasulullah calmly waits. Of course, Rasulullah became sad, which is also interesting because, they'll take this aspect of it, and those people who have, issues with the authority and the knowledge of Rasulullah, and they say, because I've heard so-called scholars of theirs say, oh, see, Rasulullah was sad because he thought Umar had killed a Muslim. Rasulullah is sad because Umar is being accused of killing a Muslim. His Umar, the one who he prayed for, whose iman he prayed for, is being accused of killing a Muslim. That's what saddened him. So Allah reveals this verse. Yeah. So again, this verse here in Surah Hujurat, verse number 9, could not have been applied during the time of Rasulullah, because again, who would they go to? They would go to him, and if anyone did not comply with what he decided, well, you're no longer Muslim. In this verse, both parties remain Muslim. So Imam Shafi rahmatullahi alayhi, he says that he took all of the rulings in regards to this verse from the dispute between Ali radiallahu anhu and Muawiyah radiallahu anhu. Okay. So that's where he took all of the rulings regarding this verse. Why Ali? Why did he have to be part of this? Because Ali, Rasulullah said, Ali is the truth is with Ali. He didn't say Ali is with the truth. He said the truth is with Ali. And he also said that in Hadith in Tirmizi that, oh Allah, turn the truth in the direction of Ali. Whichever way Ali goes, the truth should go that way. And that's a very, that's a much more powerful statement than if he said that Ali turned with the truth. No, he says the truth will turn with Ali. Whichever way Ali goes, the truth will go that way. And the Quran is what? Quran is al-haq. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about him, about himself, وَقَوْلُهُ الْحَقِّ in the Quran. And whatever Allah says is the truth. So again, because the Quran is with Ali. And we need to understand that in order to understand the Quran. Now, if you look even like within the companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you have like Abdullah ibn Masud, radiallahu anhu. Amongst the companions, he's number 2 as far as knowledge of fiqh. Second to who? To Ali. Abdullah ibn Masud, radiallahu anhu, is also one of those scholars of the Quran, of the recitation of the Quran. Okay. And he says that I learned 70 surahs directly from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. People will mention this part of his statement. They forget to mention where he says that he learned the rest of it from Sayyidina Ali, the other 44 surahs he learned from Ali. So, because again, Ali is that door to the gate to the city of knowledge. He is that gateway. And the Quran is what? The Quran is knowledge. So if we expect to understand or to try to apply the Quran, there is no other way if we're going to do it appropriately. Otherwise, we'll be under those who, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Baqarah, وَيُضِلُّ بِهِ كَثِيرًا وَيَهْدِي بِهِ كَثِيرًا وَمَا يُضِلُّ بِهِ إِلَّا الْفَاسِقِينَ. Allah says what? That many, not a few, many, kathrat, in abundance, people are misguided by this, but also in abundance, people are guided by this. So which one do you choose? But there is no guidance to the Quran unless there is that love of Ahlul Bayt. So this is, why this is so important to understand, and especially like, again, Ramadan comes, so we focus on the Quran, right? But that focus, unfortunately for a lot of people, is simply in the words, without making the connection. So to them, they're just words. Okay. And this is why you can have people like Tariq Masood, say, oh, there are grammatical mistakes in the Quran. And he justifies this. And the more interesting thing about that statement of his, if you look at the beginning part of that statement, he's insulting the knowledge of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then that leads him into this. And you still have people that, what a great scholar. You have songs in honor of him. You pull them up on YouTube. Because again, these are people who have no true connection with Ahlul Bayt. That's why they can say things like this. The same, and the other aspect of that, if you look at that statement of his, that they're grammatical, because of a certain verse that he talks about. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ وَلَوْ كَانَ مِنْ عِنْدِ غَيْرِ اللَّهِ لَوَجَدُوا فِيهِ اخْتِلَافًا كَثِيرًا, which is also Surah Nisa. I'm blanking on exactly what verse it is. But, he says, do you not ponder over the Quran? And he's so merciful that he also tells us that if we pondered over it, what is one of the things we would understand from our pondering? He says, do you not ponder over the Quran? If this had been from someone other than Allah, you would find many contradictions in it, mistakes in it. But there are none. So for this person to claim that there are grammatical mistakes in the Quran, and of course they bring these hadiths, which is funny because they bring these hadiths that really are talking about something else. Plus, if I look at those hadiths, they are in that category of either weak or mawdu hadiths. To support themselves, they'll bring in anything. But otherwise, if you say something, oh, that's daif hadith, that's a weak hadith. All right. But when they say it, and they use that, oh, it's fine. Mm-hmm. So this guy, he's looking at this verse, and instead of thinking that, oh, there must be something wrong with my understanding here, I need to find out truly and understand this properly. No, oh, there's a mistake in the Quran. Yeah. So he can't make a mistake, but there's a mistake in the Quran. I mean, you analyze the psychology there. That's what the psychology is. And again, these are people that people are just they drool over. And you look at them, and you see, the curse of Allah upon them. You look at them, just when you look at those that are connected to the nur of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, even looking upon them, you look at them, and it calms you. It is pleasing to look at those people. Even if if I look at it from a worldly standpoint, they would say, oh, like somebody puts down criteria what they think is ugly, and all of those criteria fit that person, but it's still that that nur gives them such a beauty that they're just so pleasing to look at. Which gets to the narration of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he said that to look upon Ali is ibadah. It is worship. Where does this narration come from? Well, those who object to this narration, then I ask them, well, you have no objection to the narration of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he said to look upon the Kaaba is ibadah. To look at those stones is to worship Allah, but to look at Ali is not. Why? Because when you look at the Kaaba, it reminds you of things. It reminds you that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has taken this place as His house, even though every house is His house. But why did He take it as His house? Who all is connected to that house? Adam alayhi salam, Ibrahim alayhi salam, Ismail alayhi salam. But the greatest one connected to that is Rasulullah himself. Ali radhu is connected to Rasulullah, and not just mildly. Rasulullah said that my nur and the nur of Ali were one. For 14,000 years before the creation of Adam, 14,000 years before the creation of Adam alayhi salam. So he is an extension of that nur. So to look at him is not ibadah, it is ibadah. To look at Rasulullah is ibadah. Because he reminds you, and I'm saying this in the present tense, because if we love him, then we also look at him through that love. Because when we look at Rasulullah, he reminds us of Allah. With all of his perfection, he is not God. So how much, so who is his God? His God is Allah. That perfect creator creating that perfect creation. It should remind us. And looking at Ali should remind us of Rasulullah, who reminds us of Allah. If Rasulullah had not come, how would we know? For those of us who were born in the subcontinent, we'd probably be sitting in front of some statue. Other people would be doing other things. He is the one who has freed us from all of this, from the worshipping of all of these false gods.
There's no Islam without Prophet.
Yeah, there's no Islam without him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Period. And not just for this ummah. There was no Islam, before him or after him, without him. Because the kalma of all of the previous prophets was La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. The kalma of their followers was different. But their kalma in reality was also Muhammadur Rasulullah, because they were following that prophet who told them about the coming of Rasulullah. So the only way they accepted that prophet was in accepting Muhammadur Rasulullah. This is, why those people that were chosen at a certain time fell out of that position of being a favored nation, so that no more prophets were sent to them, because they changed that aspect and started rejecting Muhammadur Rasulullah. This is what Isa alayhi salam came to bring them back to. And so in rejecting him, they are in reality rejecting the Rasulullah. But again, there's so many verses in the Quran that, if you look at the background to those verses, they are directly connected to Ahlul Bayt. And you cannot understand them without understanding Ahlul Bayt. And even the ones that are not directly connected to Ahlul Bayt, even those are in some way connected to Ahlul Bayt. You look at the attitudes of the companions, the true attitudes of the companions of Rasulullah towards Ahlul Bayt, whether it's Abu Bakr or Umar or Uthman or any radiallahu anhum or any of them. Abu Bakr, what does he say? He says that I love to do good to the household of Rasulullah more than I love to do good to my own household. It's not a light statement. He says to be Fatma salamullah alayha, that there is no good for me in this world if you are upset with me. that everything I did, you know, spending of my wealth, making hijrah, everything I did was for the pleasure of Allah, His Messenger, and Ahlul Bayt. And that household. And this is Abu Bakr. He's making this statement when he is the Khalifa. Umar, what did he say? He prays to Allah, he says, "Oh Allah, do not allow me to see the day that there is no Ali, but there is still an Umar." He says, "Don't allow me to see that day." He says, if there had not been Ali, Umar would have been destroyed. These are people who are, you know, close to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is their statement. These are people who understood the Quran. Again, these are their statements. It's not just anybody making a statement. You know, so again, you know, it's interesting when Umar radiallahu anhu, he left for Jerusalem, and when Jerusalem is conquered, the people of Jerusalem would not hand over the key to the city. They said, unless you send the leader of the Muslims, we will give it to him. So initially they thought, well, Abu Ubaidah was the leader of the army that was there, so he goes. And they looked at him, they said, no, this isn't the man. So then they said, well, you know, the one who looks like Khalid bin Walid was the cousin of Umar, maternal cousin of Umar. So they said, well, he looks like Umar. So they sent him, and they looked at him and they said, no, that's not him either. So then they said, we want the man who looks like the second man, but dresses like the first man. And the only man that fit that description, of course, is Umar. So Umar radiallahu left to come to Jerusalem with not an entourage. He left with one servant. He makes that travel all the way by himself and that servant. And of course, we know the famous narration that, you know, when he arrived, it was the turn of the servant to be sitting on the camel, because they're taking turns who's going to be riding, who's going to be walking. You know? Again, this is the leader of the Muslim empire. And when it came time to get to that point where the people could see them, it was time for, you know, the servant to be riding. And the servant says to Umar, he says, you know, look, you know, they're going to see you, so you ride now. He said, no, it's your turn. And so there were people who were looking at the servant thinking this is the leader of the Muslims. But when he went on that journey, who did he leave behind in charge of Medina Munawwara, which in reality was in charge of the empire? Ali radiallahu anhu. You know, this is one of those points where if there had been an issue here between the two of them, Ali radiallahu could have, you know, easily at this point created a coup. Then a coup, and Umar, because Umar radiallahu is out in the desert. He could have easily done something. There were no issues between them, other than you have issues between two loving brothers. So again, you know, so the statement, Umar radiallahu statement, Lawla Aliyun fahalaka Umar. If Ali had not been there, if there had been no Ali, Umar would have been destroyed. There's certain decisions that Ali radiallahu overturned of Umar radiallahu. He made certain decisions, and Ali radiallahu said, no, you can't do this. Because he's Chief Justice. Islamically, Chief Justice in many ways has more power, and in reality actually has more power than the leader. The leader cannot call the Chief Justice into his court. The Chief Justice can call the leader into his court. So during the Khilafah of Abu Bakr, there was no official title of Chief Justice, but all of the actions that Ali undertook were of that level. During the Khilafah of Umar radiallahu, he created that position, and of course Ali radiallahu was Chief Justice. Any questions? I'm sort of going to end here, unless there's a question that's going to make me go on. But no. So it's, I mean, again, everything I said today was reviewed. Is just kind of put it together a little differently. So, nothing I said wasn't anything that I haven't already talked about. But this is a Ramadan, and if we can't understand it now, then when will we understand this? So these, even the names of Ahlul Bayt, we should teach our children these names, so they should know who their idols really are, and who they need to look at, and who they need to follow, and who they need to, most of all, who they need to love. Because we become engrossed with certain personalities, but who are they? These are the personalities we need to engross ourselves with. Okay? And these personalities also have no shortage of enemies. This is one of the things when Abdullah, the son of Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, his son Abdullah, who was also a scholar, he asked his father, he says, what was the status of Ali? How can I understand the status of Ali? And he said, if you want to understand the status of Ali, I'll tell you one simple thing. He said, Ali Radha had many enemies. No shortage of enemies. But none of them could find a single thing to use against him. Because these days, he did that. You find something in somebody's character that's a flaw, and you use that against them. Or something they did that was wrong, and you use that against them. He said, Ali had no, enemies, because Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said that only a hypocrite will have animosity against you, and only a believer will love you. So he is that demarcation. Many hypocrites read the Quran, many hypocrites memorize the Quran. Many hypocrites sit up and give tafsir of the Quran. How do you know who is who? The name of Ali. It clarifies many things. So this is what he tells his son. He says, Ali had many enemies, no shortage of enemies. But none of them could find anything against him. Because if they had, they would have said it. There was nothing. This is like with Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. You never see, there's no statement of Quraysh that, you used to do this before, you claim now, you claim this. They couldn't, because there was nothing. There was nothing in his character that was flawed of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Perfection. Everything is perfection. And Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam has transferred this to Ali. So that none of them could find a single thing against him that they could use. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to understand, and may He fill our hearts with His true love and the true love of His beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the household of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as well as the companions and all of those whom they love, and allow us to, understand them and to understand the Quran and to make a lot of recitation this Ramadan, but above the recitation, to understand. Doesn't mean, okay, and here, people, you need to read the Quran with the translation, which is fine, but you have to understand when you're reading the translation, there's the bias of the translator. And So you also have to be careful with that. So you have to read the Quran with the love of Allah, with the love of Rasulullah, with the love of Ahlul Bayt. And if you read the Quran that way, then you will see many things, many doors that will open up to you. You know, you read that same verse that you read, you know, the other day, and you read it again, and now, you know, there's just a different understanding that, you know, stuff that it's like, oh, you know, how did I miss that? But that only comes, that comes with a lot of people, but the true understanding only comes with the love of Ahlul Bayt. So may He give us that love. And may He give strength and protection and victory to our brothers and sisters in Gaza and Palestine and wherever, you know, in Sudan and wherever the Muslims are being oppressed. And may He allow us this spiritual oppression that is going on throughout the world, where people's iman is being stolen and they don't even recognize it. May He not make us amongst those, and may He protect the ummah from this fitna. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.